Welcome back, 7th grade Richmond Scholars. I am Ms. Whitaker, and I'm excited to have you join me for another math lesson. This is week 6, day 2, and we're going to review concepts related to SOL 7.10e. So let's get started. Let's review the you-try questions from the previous lesson. Check your answers first. If you answered any of the questions incorrectly, take some time to identify what you did differently, and then correct your answers before moving on. So for number 1, you were given a graph, and you were supposed to create a table, write an equation, and also write a verbal description that represents the relationship from the graph. So from your graph, you can take the data points, or the points that are along the graph, they were already on the graph given to you, and make a table from these points. Okay, so you know an ordered pair is set up x, y, your x coordinate first, your y coordinate second. Therefore, that correlates to your graph. So you have your x values and your y values. So the first x and y value will be 1, 2. Then the next x and y value will be 2, 4. The next one, 3, 6. The following one, 4, 8. And the last one, 5, 10. Okay. From there is 2 ways to find or to determine your slope. One, you can find the relationship between your x and y values. So here, I have to think to myself, how can I go from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 3 to 6? What's happening each time? Each time they are multiplying by 2. Your y values are 2 times larger than your x values. So each time you multiply your x values by 2 to get the corresponding y values. 1 times 2 gives you 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 2 is 6, and so on. Okay? So your slope is equal to 2. And there's a second way to find the slope from a table. You can find the change in y over the change in x. Therefore, you're going to look at your y values and determine how they are changing. So to go from 2 to 4, I know I must add 2. The values are increasing by 2. Okay, 4 to 6, same thing. 4 plus 2 will give you 6. 6 to 8, again, you will add 2. And 8 to 10, add 2. So the y values are increasing by 2. Now to find the change in x, you would do the same thing with your x values. How can you go from 1 to 2? You would add 1. 2 to 3, add 1. 3 to 4, add 1. And 4 to 5, add 1. So from there, you will use the formula change in y over change in x, which will be 2 over 1, which is equal to 2. Therefore, your slope, again, is equal to 2. And there's 2 ways you could have determined the slope. From there, we can write an equation. We know we're going to use the equation y is equal to mx, where m equals the slope. Okay? So our relationship is a proportional relationship. Okay? 2 represents our constant rate of change. Therefore, you're going to use the equation y is equal to mx, which represents a multiplicative relationship or a proportional relationship. Okay? So here you would just substitute the slope you got for m in the equation. And the equation will read y is equal to 2x. The verbal description that I came up with was Megan walks around the park in the afternoon. She recorded that she walks 2 miles every hour. Write an equation to model the relationship between the number of hours she walks, X, and the number of miles she can walk in that time, Y. So for your verbal description, you could have described any relationship where the output was 2 times greater than the input. So an example could be notebooks cost $2 each, or someone can make 2 masks in 1 hour. Okay, so any relationship where the output is 2 times larger than the input would have been correct. And also with your table, it does not matter what X values you use, as long as the Y values are 2 times greater. If you multiply your X values by 2 to get your Y values, then your answer was correct for the table. So for number 2, you were given a verbal description, and from there you were supposed to graph a line that represents the relationship, write an equation, and create a table that all represents the relationship from the verbal description. Sam is taking guitar lessons and will learn one new song per week. When he started, he already knew how to play 3 songs. Write an equation to model the relationship between the number of songs Sam knows how to play, Y, and the number of weeks, X, he has been taking lessons. So when I read this problem, I see 2 keywords, one being per. Per represents a constant rate of change. Therefore, it is a slope keyword. It represents your slope. And your slope is equal to 1. Okay? What is actually changing per week? The number of songs you are learning. And you only learn 1 song per week. Okay? Therefore, your slope is equal to 1. Okay? I also see the phrase he already knew. You also could have highlighted or circled the word started instead of he already knew. Either one will work. So he already knew how to play. He already knew how to play 3 songs. Okay. So when he started out, he knew 3 songs. So if he doesn't learn any new songs in the coming weeks, then he still will know how to play 3. So that represents your y-intercept. It is your starting point. And we know the y-intercept is the y value when x is equal to 0. So in this case, when x is equal to 0, being the number of weeks he has been taking lessons, when that is 0, y is 3 because he already knows how to play 3 songs. Okay? So therefore, your y-intercept is equal to 3. From there, we can write an equation. We know this is an additive relationship, and we also know that the slope is 1. Therefore, we're going to use the equation y is equal to x plus b. Okay? Where b represents your y-intercept. So in this equation, all you do is substitute b for 3, which represents the y-intercept or our starting point. Okay? And when you see x by itself, then you know that the slope is 1. We just don't write the 1, but it's beside the x. Okay, so the equation is now y is equal to x plus 3. where Y is equal to the number of songs he knows how to play, and X represents the number of weeks he has been taking lessons. From there, we can create a table using our equation. Okay, we know the relationship between X and Y is additive, and each time we're going to add 3. Therefore, I started at 0 and I went in order. From there, I just added 3 to each of my X values to get my corresponding Y values. So 0 plus 3 is 3, 1 plus 3 is 4, 2 plus 3 is 5, and 3 plus 3 is 6, and so on. So your table would have been correct if your relationship is to add 3. So it does not matter what X values you chose. As long as you're adding 3 to each of those X values to get your Y values, then your table is correct. From there, we can graph the ordered pairs from our table. Okay, so the first order pair would be 0, 3, and that also represents our y-intercept. Because again, we know that the y-intercept is the y value when x is equal to 0. Here, x is equal to 0 and the y value is 3. Therefore, this point here represents our y-intercept. It is where the line crosses the y-axis. Okay, so to plot that point, you will go to the origin and move 1, 2, 3 units up and plot your point. So you found 3 on the y-axis and plot your point. That represents your y-intercept. To plot the point 1, 4, start at the origin, move 1 unit to the right and up 4 units. To plot 2, 5, start at the origin, move 2 to the right and up 5 units. To plot 3, 6, start back at the origin, move 1, 2, 3 to the right and up 6 units. To plot 4, 7, start back at the origin, move 4 to the right and up 7 units. And lastly, to plot 5, 8, you're going to start back at the origin, move to the right 5 units and up 8 units. From there, you should have taken your ruler or your straight edge to connect the dots and create your line. So at this point, you can correct your answers before moving on. So today we will be completing a math task. In this math task, we will be able to make connections between and among representations of a proportional or additive relationship between two quantities using verbal descriptions, tables, equations, and graphs. So materials needed for today's lesson, you need a pencil, you need paper. You can use regular paper. If you have some graph paper on hand, then please pull that out. You also need a calculator and a ruler or a straight edge. Make sure to write all of your notes, guided practice, and you try problems down in your notebook. And if you have access to a printer, you can print out slides 9 through 11 and use those along with the video. So I am displaying the vocabulary words. These vocabulary words have been discussed throughout SOL 7.10, and they are here for your reference. I am also including the chart we talked about on Friday that compares proportional relationships to additive relationships and their different representations. Okay, so this is also here for your reference. So our math test. How long does it take for an iPhone to charge? Your iPhone is dead. You plug it in and anxiously wait it to charge. Here is what you notice. So if you look at the little charging icon, We all have these on our phones, right? So at 0 minutes charged, so you see nothing, you have 0% charged. Okay. 15 minutes after plugging in, you have 10% charged. 18 minutes after plugging in, you have 12% charged. 1 hour after plugging in, you have 40% charged. At what rate is your phone charging? Use multiple representations along with an explanation to justify your solution. So when you are working on this math task, these are some questions to consider. Number one, what are two things or units am I comparing? So what's being compared in the problem? Okay. And what ways can I represent this relationship? We talked about 4 different ways. It doesn't matter if the relationship is proportional or additive. We discussed 4 different ways to represent a relationship. And then thirdly, what type of relationship is this? Is it proportional or is it additive? An explanation for justifying your answer. Please explain your thinking in full sentences. And lastly, direct your attention to the time plugged in. Okay. Notice that all the examples represent an amount of time, but in what units of time? Remember that we are finding the relationship between 2 different units of time, not 3. So we compare 2 units, not 3. For example, you will compare miles to gallons, not miles to meters to gallons, because miles and meters represent distance. So one of those will have to be changed because you only want 2 units of time. We're going to compare 2 units, not 3. So please think about that and think about what you have to do to make the units the same. If you have access to a printer, I included a student workspace for you to answer the question and to complete the different parts of the question. If you have graph paper, then please use your graph paper for the graphing portion. If you don't have graph paper, then you also can use your straight edge or your ruler to create a coordinate plane. So at this point, you're going to try the math test on your own. When you finish your math test, head over to Dreambox and complete 2 Dreambox lessons. Okay? This math test will be discussed in the next lesson. That's all I have for today, guys. I will see you in the next math lesson. Enjoy your day.